The house was an inferno, flames consuming it with a hunger that could never be satisfied. The heat was unbearable, even from across the street where paramedic Ethan Riley stood, gripping his radio so tightly his knuckles turned white. "Engine 12, status report," he barked into the radio, his heart pounding against his ribs. The response was static. Then, through the crackling interference, a voice he knew too well, his best friend, Mike Grayson. "I'm going back in." Ethan's stomach twisted. "Mike! No! The structure's collapsing!" But the line went dead, and before Ethan could stop him, Mike disappeared into the wall of flames, his silhouette swallowed by the fire. Minutes passed like hours. The house groaned, fire licking at its skeletal remains. Debris rained down, and Ethan stood frozen, his instincts screaming at him to run inside. But he knew better. Mike knew better too, but that never stopped him before. Then it happened. The roof gave in with a deafening crash, and the fire exploded outward in a wave of heat and light. Ethan took a step forward, then another. "Mike!" No response. The fire raged on. But Mike never came back out. Hours turned into days, and the search for Mike continued. Ethan worked alongside the fire crews, his hands blistered from sifting through the debris. He refused to believe Mike was gone. They hadn't found his body. There was still hope. "He's out there," Ethan muttered, mostly to himself as he combed through the wreckage for the 100th time. "He's gotta be." Hannah, his partner, placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "Ethan, we need to accept—" "No," he snapped, shrugging her off. "Not yet." But deep down, Ethan felt it, the quiet, creeping dread that told him he was looking for a ghost. The official report came 2 days later. No remains were found. Mike Grayson was declared missing, presumed dead. The department held a memorial service, his gear placed solemnly on a chair with his picture beside it. Ethan sat in the back, his hands clenched into fists, feeling suffocated under the weight of loss and guilt. "He shouldn't have gone back," Hannah whispered beside him. Ethan stared at the empty chair where Mike should have been and whispered, "I should have stopped him." Weeks passed, the fires continued, and then the sightings started. The first was from a rookie firefighter working a warehouse fire on the east side of town. He claimed he'd seen someone standing inside the burning building, dressed in full gear, just watching. The silhouette never moved, never responded to shouts. The rookie swore it looked like Mike. Then came more reports. At every major fire in the city, someone would catch a glimpse of a lone firefighter standing at the edge of the flames, unmoving, silent. Each time, he vanished before anyone could reach him. Ethan dismissed it as grief playing tricks on people's minds, until he saw it for himself. It was a late-night call, an abandoned house fire near the outskirts of town. Ethan arrived on scene, the flames licking at the sky, the air thick with smoke and desperation. And then, through the smoke, he saw him, standing just beyond the blaze, watching. Mike. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. "No way," he whispered, stepping forward. The figure didn't move, didn't speak, just stood there, staring into the flames like they held all the answers. Ethan took another step, but as the smoke shifted, Mike was gone. The encounters continued. Every time Ethan responded to a call, he felt it. Mike was there. At first, he thought it was just his mind playing tricks on him, a desperate attempt to hold on to hope. But then others started talking. Firefighters, paramedics, even civilians claiming they'd seen the firefighter who wouldn't leave. One night, unable to shake the feeling, Ethan drove out to the ruins of the house where it all started. The air was still, the night silent, save for the distant hum of traffic. He stood there, staring at the charred foundation, whispering into the darkness, "Mike, if you're out there, if you hear me, why?" A gust of wind stirred the ashes at his feet, and for a split second, he heard it, his name carried on the breeze. "Ethan!" He spun around, but there was no one there, just the cold remnants of a fire long extinguished. Ethan barely slept after that. Every night, he would wake up sweating, his dreams filled with flickering flames and the feeling of someone standing at the foot of his bed. One night, he awoke to the smell of smoke, thick and suffocating. He bolted upright, coughing, but the room was clear, no fire. But his gear, which he'd left in the corner of his room, was covered in ash. His hands trembled as he reached for the radio, static crackling to life on its own. "I had to go back." Ethan dropped the radio, his pulse pounding in his ears. He knew then that Mike was still out there, not in body, but in spirit, trapped in the fire that took him. The next fire Ethan responded to, he didn't hesitate. He walked straight to where he knew Mike would be. "Mike," he called into the inferno, "you don't have to do this anymore." But the figure in the flames only stared, unmoving, before slowly fading into the smoke. Ethan clenched his fists, tears burning in his eyes. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I should have stopped you." The fire crackled in response, and for a brief moment, he thought he heard a familiar voice whisper back, "You tried." Weeks later, Ethan found himself parked outside the station, staring at the empty bay where Mike's gear had once been. He couldn't bring himself to move on, not yet. And then, in the reflection of the ambulance window, he saw it. A figure standing in the distance, watching. Ethan didn't turn around. He didn't need to. He knew Mike would always be there, watching, waiting, trapped between the past and the present. Some firefighters save lives, some give their own, and some never leave.